I used to believe that trust was the foundation of marriage. That when you love someone completely, you don't need to question where they go or who they're with. I used to think that GPS trackers were for paranoid husbands and jealous wives, not for men like me, who had built the perfect life. I was wrong about everything. The day I opened that Amazon package and held a small black tracking device in my hands, I crossed a line I never thought I'd cross. But sometimes, the only way to protect what you've built is to destroy the illusion that it was ever safe to begin with. My name is Ryan Mitchell. I'm 33 years old, work as a senior operations analyst at a mid-sized consulting firm, and I've always been the kind of man who plans everything twice. I believe in loyalty, in keeping your word, in building something solid that lasts. I thought I'd found someone who shared those values. I met Melissa 6 years ago at our mutual friend Sarah's wedding reception. The ceremony had been beautiful. One of those perfect September afternoons where the light hits everything just right. But it was during the reception that my world changed. I was standing by the bar, nursing a whiskey and watching couples spin across the dance floor. When I saw her, she wore an emerald green dress that hugged her curves perfectly, her auburn hair falling in waves over her shoulders. When she laughed at something her friend said, the sound cut through the music and conversations like it was meant specifically for my ears. I found myself walking over before I'd even decided to move. "You look like someone who doesn't dance," she said, green eyes sparkling with mischief as I approached. "You look like someone who could change that," I replied, surprising myself with the smoothness of it. We danced until midnight. Her hand felt perfect in mine, her body moving against me like we'd been doing this for years instead of hours. When the last song ended and the lights came up, I knew I wasn't going to let her walk away. Our courtship lasted 2 years. 2 years of long conversations over dinner, weekend trips to small towns we'd never visited, quiet Sunday mornings reading newspapers in bed. She was everything I'd been looking for: intelligent, funny, supportive. When she laughed at my terrible jokes or listened patiently as I explained some boring work project, I felt like I'd won the lottery. Our wedding was perfect. We held it at a small lakeside venue about an hour outside the city. Melissa looked radiant in her white dress, tears streaming down her face as she promised to love, honor, and cherish me until death do us part. I believed every word. When I slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her as my wife, I felt like everything in my life had finally clicked into place. There was just one small detail that Harold, Melissa's father, insisted on before the wedding: a prenuptial agreement. At first I was insulted. Did he think I was marrying his daughter for money? But Harold was old school, protective of his family's assets, and he made it clear the wedding wouldn't happen without it. The prenup was straightforward except for one clause that seemed almost ridiculous at the time: adultery. If either party cheated, they forfeited all claims to marital assets. Everything would stay with the faithful spouse. I remember sitting in the lawyer's office, pen in hand, looking at that clause and almost laughing. It felt like insurance against something that would never happen. "Are you sure about this?" Melissa had asked, her voice soft with concern. "It seems so final." "Babe," I'd replied, taking her hand, "I'm never going to give you a reason to worry about this." "Are you?" She'd smiled, kissed my cheek, and signed her name with a flourish. "Never," she'd answered with confidence. Our honeymoon in the Caribbean was like a dream. 7 days of white sand beaches, crystal blue water, and making love like teenagers. We barely left our beachfront suite. Melissa would lie next to me in the morning, her skin golden from the sun, and I'd think about how lucky I was, how perfectly everything had worked out. We came home to the house I'd bought 6 months before our engagement, a modest 3-bedroom colonial in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. The mortgage was manageable on my salary, the yard was big enough for the kids we planned to have, and Melissa loved the kitchen with its granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. During our 2nd year of marriage, Melissa made the decision to stop working. She'd been a part-time graphic designer, freelancing for small businesses, but she said she wanted to focus on making our house a home. I supported the decision completely. My income was enough to cover our expenses, and I loved coming home to find dinner prepared, the house spotless, Melissa waiting for me with a glass of wine and stories about her day. Our life fell into a comfortable rhythm. Weekend brunches at our favorite cafe, Saturday afternoons at the farmer's market. Sunday evenings planning the week ahead. We talked about starting a family, maybe taking a European vacation next summer, possibly upgrading to a bigger house in a few years. Everything felt stable, secure, perfect. But 6 weeks ago, something shifted. It started small, so small I almost missed it. Melissa mentioned that her sister Amanda was going through a rough patch. Amanda lived about 2 hours away in a small town called Millfield, and she'd recently separated from her husband. She needed support, Melissa explained. Sisterly advice. Someone to lean on during a difficult time. At first, the visits seemed reasonable. Once a week, maybe twice. Melissa would drive out on a Saturday morning, spend the day with Amanda, and come home by evening. She'd tell me about their conversations, how Amanda was holding up, what they'd done together. Shopping, long walks, heart-to-heart talks over coffee. It all seemed perfectly normal. But then the frequency increased. What had been weekly visits became twice a week, then 3 times. The trips got longer, too. What used to be day trips became overnight stays. Melissa would pack a small bag, kiss me goodbye Friday evening, and not return until Sunday afternoon. Amanda really needs me right now, she'd explain, her voice soft with concern. I'm the only family she has nearby. I wanted to be understanding. Family is important. Sisters stick together during hard times. Amanda was going through a divorce. Of course, she needed support. But something in my gut started to twist with each departure, each extended absence. The math didn't add up either. 4-hour round trips 3 times a week, full days away from home, late returns even on supposedly short visits. When I'd ask about specifics, what they'd done, where they'd gone, Melissa's answers became increasingly vague. Oh, you know, just sister stuff, she'd reply with a wave of her hand. Talking, crying, eating too much ice cream. I felt guilty for doubting her. This was my wife, the woman I'd promised to trust completely. Amanda was her sister. Of course, Melissa wanted to help her through a difficult time. I was being paranoid, selfish, unreasonable, but the feeling in my stomach wouldn't go away. It sat there like a stone, growing heavier with each passing day. I'd watch Melissa pack her overnight bag, kiss me goodbye, promise to call when she arrived safely, and something inside me would whisper that this wasn't right. I started paying closer attention. The way she'd check her phone constantly in the days leading up to a visit. How she'd disappear into the bathroom for long conversations that ended abruptly when I came near. The new perfume she'd started wearing, more expensive than anything in her usual collection. Small changes that might mean nothing, or everything. 3 weeks ago, I broke. I did something I never thought I'd do. Something that went against every principle I believed in about trust and marriage. But the doubt was eating me alive and I needed to know the truth. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself I was overreacting. But when that small package from Amazon arrived 3 days later, I didn't send it back. I opened it. The GPS tracker was smaller than I'd expected. About the size of a matchbox, black plastic with a magnetic backing. The Amazon listing had promised real-time location tracking, 30-day battery life, and discreet monitoring for peace of mind. Reading those words had made my stomach turn, but not enough to stop me from ordering it. I'd spent 3 days staring at the unopened package on my desk, telling myself I wouldn't actually use it. This was paranoia. This was crossing a line I'd never thought I'd cross. This was violating the trust that should exist between husband and wife. But every time Melissa mentioned another visit to Amanda, every time she packed that overnight bag with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, the package seemed to stare back at me. The morning I finally did it, Melissa was in the shower. I could hear the water running, her voice humming something cheerful and off-key. It was Thursday. She'd already announced her plans for another weekend trip to Millfield. Amanda's having a really hard time, she'd said over breakfast. I think I'll stay through Sunday this time. My hands were shaking as I slipped outside in the dawn cold, still wearing my pajamas and slippers. The GPS tracker was so small it felt like nothing in my palm. The magnetic backing clicked against the metal with a soft snap as I attached it under her car's rear bumper, hidden behind the spare tire mounting. The whole thing took less than 30 seconds. Walking back to the house, I felt like I'd committed a crime. The guilt was suffocating, heavy and thick in my chest. What kind of husband tracks his wife? What kind of marriage requires surveillance? I'd always believed that trust was the foundation of everything, and here I was, demolishing that foundation with my own hands. But I couldn't ignore my instincts anymore. Something was wrong. The woman I'd married, the woman who used to tell me everything about her day, had become a stranger who disappeared for days at a time with explanations that felt rehearsed. 2 days passed in tense normalcy. Melissa went about her usual routine, coffee in the morning, light housework, phone calls that she always ended when I entered the room. I went to work, came home, made conversation over dinner, and pretended everything was fine. The tracking app sat on my phone like a loaded gun. Friday morning arrived. Melissa stood at the kitchen counter packing her overnight bag with the same careful attention she always gave it. Toiletries, clothes for 2 days, the expensive perfume she'd bought last month. She was wearing makeup, more than usual for a visit to comfort her distraught sister. "I hate leaving you alone for the weekend," she said, walking over to kiss my cheek. "But Amanda really needs me right now." "Drive safe," I replied, forcing my voice to sound normal. "Call me when you get there." "I will. Love you," she said softly. "Love you too," I answered, though the words felt hollow. I watched from the window as she backed out of the driveway, her red Honda Civic disappearing around the corner. The moment she was out of sight, I opened the tracking app with trembling fingers. For the first hour, everything looked exactly as it should. The little blue dot that represented Melissa's car moved steadily east on Route 6, heading directly toward Millfield. I started to feel foolish. Maybe I really was paranoid. Maybe the doubt eating at me was just my own insecurity, my own inability to trust. But then, about an hour and 15 minutes into the journey, the car stopped. Not in Millfield, 3 towns short of it. The location pin showed a residential address I didn't recognize, 1247 Oak Street, Riverside. I pulled up Google Street View on my laptop. A small ranch house with beige siding and a neat front lawn. Nothing special, nothing that would explain why my wife was there instead of at her sister's house. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe Amanda had moved. Maybe they were visiting someone else first. Maybe the GPS was malfunctioning. There were a dozen innocent reasons why Melissa might have stopped somewhere else, but as the hours passed, the location didn't change. The blue dot sat motionless at 1247 Oak Street while my anxiety climbed higher and higher. By noon, I couldn't concentrate on anything. I kept refreshing the app, hoping to see the dot moving again, heading toward Amanda's actual address. At 2 p.m., I made a decision that would change everything. I told my manager there was a family emergency, grabbed my keys, and left work early. The drive to Riverside felt like the longest 2 hours of my life. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. My mind raced through scenarios, explanations, possibilities, most of them innocent, some of them not. I drove to Amanda's house first. I had to be sure. Amanda lived in a modest apartment complex on the outskirts of Millfield, the kind of place where young professionals and divorced people started over. I'd been there twice before, once for Amanda's birthday party, once to help her move some furniture. Her Toyota Camry wasn't in the parking lot. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, staring at her apartment windows, looking for any sign of activity. Nothing. No lights, no movement, no indication that anyone was home. My chest felt tight as I climbed the stairs to her door and knocked. Amanda answered on the third knock, wearing sweatpants and a paint-stained t-shirt. Her eyes widened with surprise when she saw me. "Ryan, what are you doing here?" she asked, clearly confused. "Hi, Amanda. I was in the area and thought I'd stop by to see how you're doing." "Is Melissa here?" I replied, trying to keep my voice casual. Amanda's face shifted, confusion replacing surprise. "Melissa? No, she's not here. I haven't seen her in... God, it's been over a month at least," she answered, her brow furrowing. The world tilted. The careful lie I'd been living in for weeks crumbled around me. "Over a month?" I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. "Yeah, we talked on the phone a few weeks ago, but she hasn't visited in forever." "Why? Is everything okay?" Amanda asked, her concern evident. I pulled out my phone, showed her the tracking app, the blue dot sitting motionless at an address 3 towns away. Amanda's hand flew to her mouth. "Ryan, I had no idea." "She's been telling you she was visiting me?" she gasped. Every weekend for the past 6 weeks, I confirmed grimly. Amanda stared at the screen, her face pale. Where is that address? She asked quietly. Riverside. Do you know anyone there? I responded. No. God, Ryan, I'm so sorry. I had no idea she was using me as cover for something, Amanda said, her voice trembling with shock and anger. I felt surprisingly calm. The panic, the anxiety, the weeks of doubt, all of it crystallized into cold, hard certainty. I knew what I had to do next. I made the phone call right there. Standing in Amanda's living room. Casual. Loving. Just checking in. Hey, babe. Melissa's voice was bright and cheerful through the speaker. I was just thinking about you. How's Amanda doing? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Better today? We're having tea and talking through some things. It's really helping her, I think, she lied smoothly. Amanda gasped beside me, her hand covering her mouth. I looked at her and mouthed the word liar. That's good to hear. Give her my love, I replied, maintaining my composure. I will. I love you too. I'll call you tonight, okay? She said sweetly. Okay. Have a good day, I answered before hanging up. I hung up. Amanda stared at me with wide eyes. She said you were having tea together, I observed coldly. We haven't had tea together since Christmas, Amanda replied, her voice hollow with disbelief. I looked down at my phone, at the blue dot that hadn't moved in 4 hours. Then I looked at Amanda, this woman whose life had been used as camouflage for my wife's betrayal. Do you want to know what's really happening? I asked quietly. Amanda nodded slowly. Yes, I think I do, she answered with grim determination. I opened my phone camera and hit record. Whatever was behind that door at 1247 Oak Street, whatever my wife was really doing when she thought she was safe behind her web of lies, the world was going to see it. Because I knew the moment we knocked on that door there was no going back. But going back to what? To pretending I didn't know? To living with a woman who could lie to my face with a smile? No. I was done pretending. I was done being the fool. Let's go, I said with cold determination. The drive to 1247 Oak Street took 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. Amanda sat in the passenger seat, her hands twisted in her lap, stealing glances at me every few seconds. I could feel her tension, her disbelief that her sister could have used her as an alibi for whatever we were about to discover. Ryan, she said as we turned onto Oak Street, what if we're wrong? What if there's an explanation? I didn't answer immediately. The blue dot on my phone hadn't moved in 6 hours. My wife had lied about her location, lied about who she was with, lied about what she was doing. There was no innocent explanation left. The neighborhood was quiet. Modest ranch houses with small front yards, the kind of place where working-class families raised their kids and minded their own business. Number 1247 sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, its beige siding and brown shutters making it indistinguishable from a dozen other houses on the street. Melissa's red Honda Civic sat in the driveway. I parked across the street and turned off the engine. For a moment, we just sat there staring at the house. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. This was it. This was the moment that would either prove my paranoia or destroy my marriage. Are you recording? Amanda asked quietly. I held up my phone. The camera was already running. Everything. We got out of the car and walked across the street. Each step felt deliberate, final, like crossing a bridge that would burn behind us. The front yard was neat, well-maintained. A small garden bloomed with late-season flowers. Wind chimes hung from the porch, creating a gentle melody in the afternoon breeze. It looked so normal, so innocent. Amanda reached the door first. She looked back at me once and I nodded. Her knuckles rapped against the wood 3 times. Footsteps inside. Movement. The sound of someone approaching. The door opened. Melissa stood there in a silk robe, navy blue with delicate lace trim. Something I'd never seen before. Her auburn hair was tousled, makeup smudged around her eyes. For a split second, her face showed nothing but casual curiosity, the expression of someone expecting a delivery or a neighbor. Then recognition hit her like a physical blow. Her green eyes went wide with shock, then terror. Her mouth opened and closed without sound, Color drained from her face until she was pale as paper. She gripped the doorframe with one hand, the other clutching the robe closed at her throat. "Ryan," she whispered. Then louder, panicked, "Ryan, how did you—" "Hello, sweetheart," I said, keeping my voice calm and my phone steady. "Having tea with Amanda?" Amanda stepped forward, her face twisted with fury. "You lying witch!" she spat. Melissa's eyes darted between us, desperate calculation replacing shock. She was trying to find an angle, a story, some way to explain this away. "I can explain," she stammered. "This isn't what it looks like. I was just—" A man's voice called from somewhere inside the house. "Babe, who's at the door?" The words hit like a sledgehammer. Melissa's face crumpled. Whatever story she'd been constructing died on her lips. There was no explaining away a man calling her babe while she stood at his door in a silk robe at 3 in the afternoon. "Her husband," I called back, loud enough for whoever was inside to hear clearly. The footsteps that followed were different. Heavier, hurried, confused. Then a man appeared behind Melissa. Shirtless, wearing only jeans that weren't fully buttoned. He was tall, lean, probably in his early 30s. Dark hair, stubbled jaw, the kind of conventionally handsome that made me understand immediately why my wife had chosen him. His eyes went wide when he saw me. "Oh, hell," he breathed. "Yeah," I agreed coldly. Oh, hell. I pushed past Melissa into the house, my phone camera capturing everything. The living room was small but tidy, decorated with the kind of generic furniture you'd find in a rental. But what caught my attention were the details that spoke of intimacy. 2 wine glasses on the coffee table, Melissa's purse on the couch, her clothes in a neat pile on the floor. "Ryan, please," Melissa said behind me, her voice breaking with desperation. "Let me explain. It's not what you think." I turned to look at her. "What do I think, Melissa?" I asked with cold precision. She opened her mouth, then closed it. What could she say? That she wasn't having an affair? That the silk robe belonged to someone else? That the man standing half-naked in the doorway was just a friend? The man, Craig, I'd learn his name later, tried to take a step forward. "Look, man, I didn't know she was—" he began nervously. I moved faster than I'd intended. My hand shot out, grabbing him by the throat, slamming him back against the wall. The impact rattled a picture frame, sent it crashing to the floor. "Don't," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Don't say a word." Craig's eyes bulged. He clawed at my hand, trying to speak, but I tightened my grip. Behind me, Melissa screamed for me to stop, but her voice sounded far away. All I could see was, this man, this stranger who'd been with my wife while I worked late nights to pay for the house she came home to. I drew my fist back and drove it into his stomach, hard. Craig doubled over, gasping, and I let him drop to his knees. Then I kicked him in the ribs, not hard enough to break anything, but hard enough to send a message. "Ryan, stop!" Melissa lunged toward me, but Amanda caught her arm firmly. "Don't you dare!" Amanda snarled, and her hand cracked across Melissa's face. The slap echoed through the room. "Don't you dare try to protect him after what you've done!" Melissa stumbled backward, her hand flying to her cheek, tears streaming down her face. "Amanda, please, you don't understand," she pleaded. "I understand perfectly," Amanda replied with venom. "You used me. You made me an accomplice in your lies. You let your husband think you were taking care of me while you were here sleeping with this piece of shit." I stood over Craig, who was still gasping on the floor, and looked down at him with cold satisfaction. "What's your name?" I demanded. "Craig," he wheezed painfully. "Craig Dawson." "Well, Craig Dawson, this is what happens when you meet with another man's wife," I stated matter-of-factly. I kicked him once more, harder this time, right in the stomach. He curled into a ball, retching. Then I turned to Melissa, who was sobbing against the wall, her perfect facade finally cracked beyond repair. "We're done," I said, making sure the camera captured her face. "Do you understand me? We are done." I walked toward the door. Amanda followed. Behind us, Melissa collapsed to her knees, begging, sobbing, reaching out like she could somehow pull me back. "Ryan, please, I can change. I can fix this. It was a mistake," she cried desperately. I paused at the doorway, turned back to look at her one last time. She looked small, broken, nothing like the confident woman who'd kissed me goodbye that morning with a smile and a lie. "Go back to Craig," I said with finality. "You made your choice." I walked out of that house and didn't look back. Amanda followed, slamming the door behind us. We got in my car in silence. I stopped the recording, checked to make sure the video had saved properly, then started the engine. The drive home was a blur, but my mind was crystal clear. I had work to do. I made 3 phone calls from my car, putting them on speaker so Amanda could hear. First, the locksmith. "I need all the locks changed on my house today. I don't care what it costs," I said firmly. "We can have someone there in 2 hours," the locksmith replied. "Make it 1 hour. I'll pay extra," I insisted. Second call went to Harold, Melissa's father. I sent him the video first, then called. "Harold, it's Ryan. Did you get the video I just sent?" I asked directly. Silence. Then, "Jesus Christ," he breathed heavily. "The prenup has an adultery clause. I'm invoking it," I stated clearly. "You have my full support, son." "Full support," Harold replied with conviction. Third call was to Margaret Sinclair, the divorce attorney I'd researched months ago, but hoped I'd never need. "Margaret, this is Ryan Mitchell. I need to file for divorce immediately. I have video evidence of adultery and there's a prenup with an infidelity clause," I explained efficiently. "How soon can you be in my office?" she asked professionally. 1 hour, I answered. "I'll be waiting," she confirmed. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the machinery of consequence was already in motion. I gave the locksmith an extra 100 to finish within the hour, because I knew Melissa would come home. I knew she'd try to explain, to beg, to manipulate her way back into the life she'd thrown away. And I wanted to make sure that when she did, the only thing waiting for her was a locked door. I was sitting in my living room when Melissa came home. The locksmith had finished 30 minutes earlier, installing new deadbolts and changing all the locks. I'd tested each one twice, making sure they worked perfectly. The old keys, Melissa's keys, were now worthless pieces of metal. I watched through the front window as her red Honda pulled into the driveway. She sat in the car for almost 5 minutes, probably trying to collect herself, trying to figure out what she was going to say. Finally, she got out and walked to the front door. She tried her key once, twice. I could see the panic rising in her movements as the key turned, but the lock didn't budge. She jiggled it harder, as if force would somehow make it work. Then she started pounding on the door. "Ryan! Ryan, please! Open the door!" she shouted desperately. I remained seated, watching her through the window. Her voice carried through the glass, broken and desperate. "I can explain everything. It's not what you think. Please, just let me come home," she pleaded frantically. I stood up, walked to the window, and opened it just an inch. Enough for my words to reach her, but not enough for conversation. "Go back to Craig," I said coldly. "Ryan, please, I made a mistake. I'll end it with him right now. I'll never see him again. Please, just give me a chance to explain," she begged, her voice getting higher and more frantic. She pressed her face against the window, her hands flat, against the glass like she could somehow push through it. Tears streamed down her cheeks, her makeup completely ruined. "You want to explain?" I asked with cold fury. "Explain 6 weeks of lies. Explain using your sister as cover while you meet another man. Explain coming home to me every Sunday night and kissing me with the same mouth that had been on him." She collapsed onto the porch, sobbing. "It just happened. It didn't mean anything. He doesn't mean anything to me. You're my husband. I love you," she cried desperately. I closed the window and drew the curtain, turned on the television. Melissa stayed on the porch for another hour, alternating between pounding on the door and breaking down in tears. Neighbors started to look. Mrs. Patterson from across the street came out to get her mail and stared openly. Perfect. Let them see. Let them witness the consequences of betrayal. Eventually, Melissa gave up and left. I tracked her movements on my phone, first to her parents' house, then to Amanda's apartment, then to several other locations I didn't recognize. She was looking for sanctuary, for someone to take her side, for a place to land while she figured out her next move. She wouldn't find any. I'd made sure of that. The video I'd recorded at Craig's house hadn't stayed private. Harold had seen it. First, after I sent it to him, he'd shared it with his wife, Janet. From there, it spread through their social circle like wildfire. Melissa's mother called 3 of her sisters. They called their children. By evening, half the family had seen their precious daughter in a silk robe at another man's door. I knew this because Harold called me that evening. "She came here," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Janet wouldn't even let her in the house." "What did you tell her?" I asked. "That she made her bed and now she has to lie in it, that she threw away a good man for whatever that was. That she's humiliated this family and herself," Harold replied with disgust. Harold paused and I could hear him breathing heavily. "I raised her better than this, Ryan. I thought I raised her better than this," he said, his voice cracking with disappointment. "I thought so too," I answered quietly. The next stop on Melissa's desperate tour was Amanda's apartment. That conversation lasted about 30 seconds. Amanda texted me afterward, told her she's not welcome here. Using me as cover for her affair is unforgivable. "Don't worry, I won't help her." By midnight, Melissa was sitting in her car outside a 24-hour diner, probably realizing that she had nowhere to go. Every relationship in her life had been built on a version of herself that no longer existed. The devoted daughter, the loving sister, the faithful wife. That woman was gone, exposed as a lie, and no one wanted to harbor the woman who remained. My phone rang once that night, Melissa's number. I declined the call without hesitation. She tried 4 more times. Each time I watched the screen light up with her name and felt nothing. No anger anymore, no sadness. Just cold, empty satisfaction. Meanwhile, Margaret Sinclair had worked late into the evening. The divorce papers were already filed. The video evidence was attached to the complaint. The prenuptial agreement was clear and unambiguous. Adultery voided all claims to marital assets. The house, the savings, the car I'd bought for her last year, all of it stayed with me. "This is one of the cleanest cases I've ever handled," Margaret had told me during our evening call. "The prenup is airtight. The evidence is indisputable. She'll get nothing." "How long?" I asked. 60 days, maybe less. "She can contest it, but with that video, no judge in the country would side with her," she replied confidently. 60 days. In 60 days, everything I'd built would be legally, permanently mine again. The house I'd saved for, the future I'd planned, the life I'd worked to create. All of it protected by a contract Melissa had signed with confidence, never imagining she'd be the one to trigger its most devastating clause. I sat in my house that night, quiet, organized, untouchable. The locks were changed. The papers were filed. The evidence was documented. Melissa was somewhere out there, probably in a motel room, realizing that some mistakes don't come with second chances. They come with consequences that last forever. 6 months have passed since the divorce was finalized. The process was exactly as swift and brutal as Margaret had predicted. Melissa received nothing under the prenup terms. No house, no savings, no alimony, no shared assets. Every dollar I'd earned during our marriage, every possession I'd acquired, every investment I'd made stayed exactly where it belonged, with me. The judge had been unmoved by her tears, unimpressed by her attorney's arguments about emotional distress and temporary insanity. The video evidence was damning. The prenuptial agreement was crystal clear. The law was simple. She committed adultery. She forfeited everything. I know where she ended up because this is a small enough area that word travels. After that first night in the motel, she found a studio apartment on the rough side of town, the kind of place where the rent is cheap because nobody else wants to live there. 600 square feet, thin walls, a parking lot full of rusted cars and broken dreams. She works now. Has to. There's no family money coming her way, no friendly divorce settlement, no graceful landing. She waitresses at a diner on Route 9, the kind of place that serves coffee and eggs to truckers and third-shift workers. I drove by once, not to see her, just happened to be in the area, and caught a glimpse of her through the window. Hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing a uniform with someone else's name on it. Refilling coffee cups for customers who probably don't tip well. The apartment, the job, the complete absence of the comfortable life she'd taken for granted. It's poetic justice in its purest form. She traded everything stable and secure for a few stolen afternoons with Craig Dawson. She thought she could have both. She was wrong. Craig, it turned out, had been married too. His wife Laura found out about the affair 2 days after I did. Apparently, Craig confessed everything in a panic, thinking honesty might save him. It didn't. Laura filed for divorce immediately, took half his assets, and moved back to her mother's house with their twin daughters. Craig's life imploded in perfect parallel to Melissa's, though he had less to lose to begin with. Melissa tried reaching out to me exactly once in those 6 months, a long text message that I deleted without reading. Then I blocked her number. Not out of anger, anger would imply I still felt something. I blocked her out of completion. She was no longer my wife, no longer my problem, no longer even my history worth preserving. Her parents still won't speak to her. Harold told me at the grocery store last month that she tried calling on his birthday. Janet hung up immediately. Some things can't be forgiven, Harold had said, shaking his head. Some choices have permanent consequences. Amanda moved away entirely. Took a job in another state, started fresh somewhere Melissa couldn't find her. Before she left, she told me she'd never forgive herself for unknowingly enabling the affair. I told her she had nothing to forgive herself for. She was as much a victim of Melissa's lies as I was. As for me, my life has found its rhythm again. The house is quieter now, but peaceful in a way it never was during those last few months of my marriage. I've started dating casually, nothing serious yet, but I'm not in a rush. Trust will come slowly this time if it comes at all. Some scars change how you love forever. Work has gone well. I received a promotion 3 months after the divorce. Senior project manager, substantial raise, corner office with windows that look out over the city. I'm considering adopting a dog. A German Shepherd, maybe? Something loyal. Something that won't lie to me about where it's been. The back porch has become my favorite spot, especially at sunset. I sit there most evenings with a beer, watching the light fade over the property I worked years to buy, thinking about the difference between building something and destroying it. Building takes time, patience, careful planning. Destroying takes one moment of selfishness, one bad decision, one broken promise. The GPS tracker is still in my desk drawer somewhere, though I haven't thought about it in months. I don't need it anymore. It served its purpose. It revealed the truth that set me free. Sometimes I think about that moment when I opened the package, the hesitation I felt, the guilt about crossing that line. Now I understand it wasn't crossing a line. It was protecting what I'd built from someone who was already destroying it. Last week, I was sitting on that porch at sunset, cold beer in hand, watching the sky turn gold and crimson. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Melissa's contact, still blocked but still there. For 6 months, I'd carried that digital ghost of our marriage, her number preserved like evidence of something that used to matter. I deleted it entirely. Not her messages, not just the block, the contact itself. Erased her name, her number, every digital trace of who she used to be to me. It felt like closing the last door, sealing the final chamber of a life I'd moved beyond. She's not my wife anymore. She's not my problem. She's not even my history worth remembering. She's just someone who made a choice and lived with the consequences. Someone who thought she could have everything and ended up with nothing. Someone who learned too late that some doors, once closed, never open again. The sunset that evening was beautiful, gold and crimson bleeding across the sky. I finished my beer, went inside, and locked the door behind me. My door, my house, my life. And for the first time in 6 months, I slept through the night without waking once.